I will start the webinar. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar about marking in PCSCHEMATIC and marking and printout marking on clip project marking. I'm Kirsten Holst, and I'm working here at PCSCHEMATIC, and I'm in charge of all our training. So that's why I won this one. And Dorte Larsen is with me too, and she's in charge of all sales, Danish and international as well. And then we were supposed to have a third person being here with us this morning, and that should be Kenneth from Phoenix Contact, but he has fallen sick. So I had this text this morning saying that he could not come because he was sick. So I'm really sorry about that, but I hope that if you have questions, we can answer them, and if not, he promised that he would come and eventually, and he will see the questions, because it's so that if you have questions, that's practical information now, you can type in the questions in the question pane, and then we'll receive them, and if we can, we'll answer them, not necessarily immediately, but we'll answer the questions during the webinar, hopefully. And if we cannot answer them during the webinar directly, then we can answer them after the webinar, because we have your mail address and we have everything that we need to know about doing that. And again, if we cannot answer them ourselves, then we have Kenneth there, and he would help answering them too. Also, after announcing the webinar, because now it's like 9 to 10 a.m. Danish time, we had a request from one of our partners in South America saying that he would really prefer us to make a webinar at another time. So we are doing the same webinar on the 7th of May. And you're welcome to signing up at that time, because hopefully Kenneth will be there as well. But hopefully he'll be well at that time, actually. So then we'll do it. But let's go and see how we can do it, and go through this webinar. Some of you have not been on this webinar or our webinars earlier on. We can see that in the list of participants. So practical information. We start now here at 9 o'clock, which is now. We will finish at 10 o'clock. We're usually pretty sharp. Today, because he's not here, maybe we'll finish a little earlier, but normally they will last for very precisely 1 hour. We will record the webinar, meaning that not because we want you to leave right now, but we will send a link to the recorded session later. And that means that you can re-see the webinar, or if you weren't at the webinar, you can see it at that time, and you're very welcome to share the webinar with colleagues and so too. But we'll record it, and if you have questions, you can send them to us. Either some of you know Dorte's and my personal mail addresses, you can use them, or you could simply type the message, the question to webinar@pcschematic.com. I think that was so much for practical information. Otherwise, it'll just be practicalities, and we don't want to go so much into that. We'll probably be there right away. The need for this webinar has been that you make a lot of electrical documentation. You make them in our program, and then you have questions about how do I do when I need to do marking with my project. And the first thing that you should know is that basically everything you have in your project, and you know what some of you know my demo projects here, everything that you have in those projects here can be used for marking, simply because what we can do is that we can take all lists from the project. That's parts list, that's not so much used for marking, but we can take components, names and everything about components out into an external file. We can take a full terminal list to an external file. We can take cables lists to external files. We can take connection lists or connection points list or wire numbers to external files. And when we do this and we use clip project marking for making the or other marking programs, it's not just clip project. I need to say that now. Ken is not here, so it's okay. but it's definitely the same drill, even though you have other programs for printing your markings. But simply to show you that everything you have in the project can be exported to external files, and the files here are the ones that we use to print the labels for whatever you want to print your labels for. And how come that we can use them here? I think the first thing that we want to see is that when I have a component like this one, this component here, Q3, if I want to have a label for Q3, that means that the label I would have inside the panel, then I'll simply use a label with the Q3 name on it, and that would be it. I might want to put a label on my component with the full name of it. So maybe I probably use reference designations in my project. And if I want to have the full name on the component, then I would add that. But I can do it simply because the name here, either the full name or the product last product name of the component, is in my my project here. Then I can export it to those external files. So if I needed to go and have a label for only my components, what I could do was I could simply go up here and then I could export this components list file. I'll get back to that, and I will simply go through components list file and see how you can do that. That's one part of lists that I could export from here. Then this one here might not be so interesting because it's just an internal component. But what is important to know when you do your projects is that you can give your components a name, and the name would be like S2 here. And again, it can have a full name with reference designations on. But then if the function of the component is part of the component, it should be written in here. And the importance of that is simply that if I take this one, and you can see if I move it, you can see that the text, the function text of it, follows it. So this text here is not just a text. The important thing is that it's part of the component's description. So this text here, if I want to change it, I could go in, of course, and give it a change. But then you can see, double click here, the text would also be in here because this text here is simply part of the component. Whereas if I went out and wrote a simple text, and I could just write this text here and placed it here, you can see that this text here is not part of anything. This is what we call a free text, and some of you know that already because you use the program a lot. But it's very, very important that whenever you have function text or any other text, any other data about the components, they need to be part of the component. If they're not part of the component, you cannot use those functions to make the labels for the components because they'll simply be free text, and free text you cannot use them for anything that makes sense at all as far as this. So I guess that some of you know this. And what do I use it for? I think I'll go into this with the list already because it might be easier to see it here. If I go up here and say I want to have a components list, you can see that I have a lot of different texts here that I can use for this component. It's so that in all the list exports that I have here, I have my database fields, database data fields, and in our program they are simply written with the capital letters all the way through, and that means that when I go through this list here with data fields, all the ones written with pure capitals, they are originating from the database. And for some components, having data in the database about them would probably be okay. That might be something like if you had, for instance, motor protection unit, then you would have in the database, you would have the values in which the motor control would, or it could be switched on and off. But I think that for components, component labels, the most relevant information is the one that originates directly from the project. And here, now we can see the difference. This one is with capital letters. It originates from the database. And this one with the small letters, normal letter written, are data fields that originate from our internal project data fields. That means that the name of the component, that's something that I have in my project. That could be like this S1, F1, S1 here, S3 here. Those are the names of components in the data in the project. So if I click on this one, because it's the same data field that I have in here, you can see that I have extra information that I could add on this one. And remember, just before when we went through the project, you can see that I have on my components, I could select to have the full name with function aspect, location aspect, product aspect in the same data field. But what I have done here, and I'll just deselect those once again, I have done it so that I have put the full reference designation of the component in a data field for themselves. That means that internally, in our way of exporting the data fields, we can make them independent of each other, so that we have one data field just with a reference designation. And again, it could be with each aspect individually. So I could have had 3 different data fields now, and that would have made sense for many of you, I guess. But I could also, as I did here, just have one big reference designations with all aspects in it. And then I have that in one column, because I'm going to export this to Excel. And then I have the name, just a pure name. That means like here, minus S1, minus W3, minus W4, minus F1, all components that I have in this project. And then I have exported also. I've exported the article number of the component. An article number here is written with small letters, whereas if I had selected the one with capital letters, I would only export those with an article number that was also in the database. I know that some of you, because I recognize some of the names here, I know that some of you use the database, that's most of you, but I know that sometimes you always also use components that are not in the database. And if you selected article number in a different way, like as from the database, then you simply wouldn't get the article number. This article number here is the article number that you have on the symbol in the project. So that's a difference between them. And again, you could have different options for this article number, either for the component, that's what I have here, that would be the most normal, or also sub-drawings could have article numbers as well, but I don't think that's so relevant for marking. And then finally, I have my function text, and this function text here is the function text as in door down or emergency stop or whatever component has a function text. And again, it originates from the project here. So what's important for you to learn here is that what I do is that I want to export my components list, and I want to set it up to, that's my selection here, to only contain parts from my project. I don't really care that much about my database in this export here, because I want to create labels for my components, irrelevant of whether I have a database connected or not, simply with the values that I have in my project. Some of you create the full projects and have everything in them. Some of you are panel builders, so you might have the data in different forms. Some of you get the project back from the panel builder, so the data will be in the project. And in this way, you're simply independent of whether you have the database on or not. So that's the reason why I have made this setup here. And when I do it here, then I think there's no questions here for that. So what I can do then is that when I export this one here, I can export it in different formats. I could either make a comma separated export. And again, some of you, and now I can say it because Kenneth is not here, some of you have printers that can accept a comma separated file. And what you need to do is that you need to select the separator between each data field. You can select whether you want to have a field header or not, and then you can open the file to see it. If I do it, I can just do it like this, and I don't want to save the changes. And then I'll export to Excel, and you can see that this one here looks not very well because something went wrong. But never mind. So I'll just go down to that one. I'll go again, list, components, list file here. This one. Wonder what went wrong. Some of you might know that, but yeah, comma separated and a field header if I wanted to do that. I could also have a column in which I've said that the column width is 16 characters. So if I open it, I cannot do that. So I'll put it up at 25. I need to change up here, and then that's really funny. This you see that? So I think I will save this one as I'll call it. This is really what I love about doing the webinars live. I think you feel the same way. So so I think I'll try this one. That's strange because I actually tried this one the other day. So that was no problem here. So I'll just do that. Okay, now I could do it. So you can see I have the column here with my reference designation. I have my column with the component name. I have my column with the article number, and you can see that I have two components in it without article number. And then I have some of the function text here, because some of my components in this project have a function text, and I'll use that for something, and you'll see that later on. So this is one way of exporting, and some printers, they want to have the list in this format. What I normally prefer is that I want to have it in this Excel file here. And then again, I can select whether I want to have a field header or not. And if I want to make this one and export it, I don't want to save the format file. Then I can open this file here, and you can see now I selected to have the header. So you can see I have the designations here, the reference designations. I have the name of the component, I have article number, I have the function text. So this list that I make here is really what forms the basic of it when I need to go on to my printer. Because what I want to do with the components list when I want to make labels of it, and the reason why I want to do it this way is that this column here, maybe I want to know exactly which part of the system that I want to create my labels for. But if you see, I think it's easier to see it here. If I have this project here, you can see that when it comes down to the physical parts, I have this part here, which is my main panel, and then I have those two parts here with which are my control parts. So I have my push buttons and I have my lamps, and all components in this project, I want to have a small yellow label inside the panel, so that when I have put it on the correct position in my panel, I'll make a label for all components simply with the name on it. And if I'll just go back to this one, then I want to have the name on yellow labels for all components and simply just put them into each part of this project here. And in this project here, well, it's a matter of taste, sort of, because maybe I wanted to add a UC1 to all components here. If I want to do that, then I could simply select the two columns. Maybe it's easier if I put them up here, because then we can see them. So if I want to have it for components here, I could make this one and this one and put them on the same yellow label and put them on the components in the project here, or in the panels. And the same goes for those two units here. That what I wanted to have at first was on the back side of the components, I wanted to have the names of all those. But basically, when I have created this project, I have created those two units here with exactly the same names, because they are exactly the same parts, meaning that when I use reference designations, I would use it to structure my project, making those two units exactly the same, because then I could stock them and I could have someone make a lot of those small panels that I could simply take down from the shelf. And if I wanted to make a lot of those small control units here, I would make them only with the name like S1P1, S2P2 on. And then when I wanted to use it, I would use one label with UC1 or UC2 or 3 and put them on the front of those panels here, because they are physically exactly the same. The only thing is that when I use them in the project, I use the reference designation to differ between the two different parts. And the same thing is also relevant when I make my labels for the components, because I don't want to if I want to pile this in my stock, then I definitely also want to make them exactly the same. So this column here is not relevant for labeling those components here. So, but if I had made it and made them for a one-time only project, and maybe I would want to have the full name on it. So that's simply up to you, and say, what do I want? And then you can have it. But what I did here is that I separated them in two different columns, because in that way I can always merge them on the label itself when I use it. The other thing is, and I could go in here because then I will see it, because right here I have opened Clip Project Marking, and this the file that I have in here is more or less the same. And in this project here, you can see that I have one column with my reference designations. I have one column here with my component name. I have one column with my article number, and I have one column with the text here. And what do I use them for? Well, for this one here, I want to go in and say that it's an Excel file, and then it knows a lot of things about how to import the file. And when I go to the next tab up here, I have decided that the labels I'm going to make right now are labels that are only, I'll go back to my project here because it's easier to see it here, they are only for the front of those two small panels here, because I think that for this project here I want to have a label saying emergency. No, this is push button. Yeah, no, it's not. This one is emergency stop and lamp door going up and door going down. I only want to have the function text for those components here. And when I go into the filters here, you can see that in column 1, I don't have any filter on, because you can see I don't do anything here. Column 2 the same, column 3 the same, but in column 4, I have put on a filter saying that I want to filter out empty values, because if I only want to make labels for the front of my small panels, then I don't want to make a label for the motor or for my motor protection. I only want to have the labels for my emergency stop, my door up, my door down, the components that have this function text. So I can simply go to column 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and say column 4, all the empty values, get them out of here because I don't want to use them. And that's how I do it here. Kenneth could probably tell you a lot more about different filter types that I could have, but what you can see is that I could either go up and select multiple values. I could go in and say include, not include, larger than, no, I cannot include, not include, equals, not equals, and then I could have two different things that they need to live up to. But the simple filter that I have made here is simply that if I don't have anything in column 4, means no function text, off with it. Then I have a part here called logic tree, and that's again for using with my reference designations. It's not relevant in this one here because here I just simply said that empty values, and then that's enough. Then I could set up condition fields, and condition fields could, for instance, be that, and that's the reason why I have my article numbers. I could have components that were very big, meaning that the label that those very big components needed would be another one than small components have. And the only way that I can see is it a big component or a small component or a special component, whatever, is by using the article number of that component. So that means that when I have an article number of the component, I can set up some conditions for specific article numbers. And that's the reason why I used the or also included the article numbers in this export. So it's simply about using the information that I have in this one, but then I could go in and set up different conditions here. I could also go in and say that when I have different, if I wanted to have different materials, I could also set up conditions here saying that different materials would simply depend on the different article numbers that I have. And then you can see in the columns, I would say it was in column 3 instead of in column 1. But what I have done here is that I have simply selected a default article number for my labels, a default label. So this last field that I have in here is that what do I actually want to put on my label? And this is what I have left to work with. And what I want to have, and I'll zoom in a little bit here. I could go to like this. I simply have this label here. And now it looks like this. You can see the result in here. It's a preview. But this label here is one with a hole in it because I think that I have push buttons and lamps and they're going through the front panel. So what I want to have on this front panel is that I want to have the name and I want to have the function text. And column 2 is the name. If I also wanted to have the reference designation, I could go up, drag it here, and then it would be, now it's thinking, now it will simply go in and say the full name of this, and it looks not very well. Then I could go in and mark this and say I want to have it this way, and I could have a different Arial narrow, I think. Then it would have a different font here. And then you can see that if I zoom in again, I'm not the champion of this program here, but it seems to work here. Then I could go in and say this is what my label should look like, and then it simply looks like this. And remember, you need to filter it out and you need to select the label, and then you have the columns here and you simply do, I don't know how many of you make Christmas cards or labels for Christmas cards. Sometimes I do, but you can do more or less the same operation actually in Word or Excel sheet into Word and make, we call it merging, letter merging or something, and it's more or less the same kind of operation that you do here. Simply saying column 1, contents of column 1, where do I want that, if you want it. Column 2, contents of that, where do I want it. And here I've had a new line because in column 4 I have that. So whatever you have in up here, you don't need to have it. You can simply select how to have it here, and then have a preview. And when you say import, then you can import it. And I think I use this one here. I should open it, and I think this is not my, yeah, it was my lucky day. So now my file comes up and this is ready to print on the printer. Okay. that is how I use it in Clip Project. The basics of it is that I can go up here in this data interchange, and if I have PC schematic something, I can simply make setups like this one I had here for my labels for my front operations. It's simply a template that has been made up here. We make some templates that comes if you download this. There's an interface on our webpage for Clip Project. I think I could find it up here, and in PC Schematic here, and we have use the service download modules drivers. You can see here Clip Project Marking. This one here, you can simply download this tutorial and the interface to it. And when you download that, and you download the tutorial as well, then you can simply see how to do this, and you get this interface as well. But together with that, you'll have some templates that are installed. I didn't do it that way. I did it differently. But that simply means that when you get back to this one, you will have some templates here that you can go in and use directly for your exports. Some of you, that includes me, also have this one in which you can go down and create your own templates. And Kenneth is not here, but I don't know whether Phoenix Contacts have a template, or whether they have a YouTube video that shows how you can create your own templates. But you can go down, and if you have a full version of Clip Project, you can make your own templates here. And I guess that a lot of you guys who are attending here do have this one. So if you want to create a new template, you simply go down, and then you could go into this one and say you want to have a new, and you step through exactly the same steps as I did before. So that's how you use this part here. Again, I'm not the champion in this, so I think I'll leave this part here. Again, this is only Clip Project, and the same thing about how to print everything would probably be, I guess, so for all other printers. We tried it once to also have the Weidmuller printer, the Mprint Pro printer, and it works more or less the same way. We can export the same Excel file, and then we can import it. And again, I think sometimes it's easier to work with Excel files instead of the direct link that we can have from our program. But sometimes it's a matter of taste whether you want to have it one way or the other. I think that it could be a good way of having it. So much about the component list export, but some of it that you learned there is okay for the rest. I think I'll go through a couple of other lists that you can export here. If you want to make markings for your terminals, you can go in, and again you can say your terminals. You want to create a terminal list. Then when I have it here, I can open, and I have here CP terminal label. They are CP for Clip Project. In this one again, I have one column with my reference designations. I have one column with my component name. That is my terminal name. We use in our programs, we have the terminal row name, that's X1 here. We have the connection names. They are U, V, W, P, E. And then I have my position number in my component here. And again, the type or article number simply to use to differ between big labels, small labels. But position number is simply to use it together with multi-layer terminals. And for that, I need to know what position components are in. I don't know how much you use my the terminals here, but if I go up and have a normal through terminal like this one, I'll call it X2 :1, and I can put one more here, :2, and :3, :4. This one here is a small terminal row, and if I right click on this one, I have my terminal row. that was X2. I think I had a lot of different components in this one, but X1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all those here, they are the same ones here. They are one small terminal row, and you can see that all terminals in this terminal row, and I'm quite sad that I made a new 1, 2, 3, 4, but the terminals here, they are one layer terminals, and you can see that in here simply by seeing there are so and so many boxes with only one number in. I think I'll just I'll go up and take this one, give it a new name, and I think I'll also delete this here because then I can do something else. But the terminals in here, you can see that right click, show terminal row, you can see that they are 4 unique components here. If they would double layer components, first of all, if I selected them from the database, this is a double one. You can see here, this is the new version 20, which is released in Denmark and will come out internationally very, very soon. But then you can see that this one should be X3. This one is number 5. This one up here, maybe I took the wrong one here. I'll take that one here. This one comes in with that one. That is number 3, colon, question mark here. That is not so good. That is my latest build, but then I'll do this one here instead. If I go in here and go to what we call component grouping, I can go in here and say that I have 2 positions per terminal. And if I want to group them here, you can see that one component group is one component, position 1, position 2, one component group here again 2, is one new component, position 1, position 2. And when I do it here this way and say show terminal row, you can see that I have one component here, position 1, position 2, one component here, position 1, position 2. And remember, when I wanted to have this terminal list and export it, I wanted to have, now I need to open the old one here again, I wanted to have the position number here, simply because when I want to export this list, when I want to create my real labels, I want to have one long label for position 1s and one long label for position 2s, because in that way all even numbers on one label, all uneven numbers on another label, but it's only because they're numbered here. If you have real components, they might be called plus and minus and UVW and whatever, but you need to keep track of which is at the bottom, which is at the top, or in the middle, or whatever. And I know some of the suppliers, terminal suppliers, they have multi-layers, so it's very important for you to be really sure about which layer or which position does each terminal belong to. In that way, you can export the list here and you can have real labels that will fit with them. And by the way, what we can see here too is that this one, if you use it that way, when you download, by the way, that interface between the 2 programs, you actually get this program point here called external program. And if you imported or install the Clip Project interface, or say Clip Project here, if you install the Weidmuller interface, it will say mprint Pro here. So if you have that printer, you can do that. But again, also with the Weidmuller printer, it's very easy for you to import Excel files. And I think a lot of times, it's my experience, sometimes it works better to have the Excel files, because it's a good tool that you can use anywhere, really. So I think personally I prefer that one. I think the other one is very good, but it only allows for you to have one export, because when you go into some of the other programs, you don't have necessarily the option to select from different labels of that, because it's been fixed. So I think the most flexible one is export to Microsoft Excel or comma separated, whatever, export them to one of those open formats, and then you can have different templates in the printer program when you want to import them. So yeah, that's it. This one, I'll close this one because that was enough about that. Cable lists, again, you know, when you want to have a cable label for this cable here. Now we're also closing in on the wire numbering. They follow the same standard. One of the things that you might want to, when you want to have a label for the cables, you might want to only have a label, call it W2, because that's cable number 2. If that's what you want to use for marking up or labeling the cable, then you can go up again, cables list file, and you can, I have those CP here. Then you can go in and say again, reference designation in one column, cable name, and the cable name would be all you needed, probably with reference designations, by the way. But then you could use that for the label, and then you could print one for each end. Or you maybe also wanted to have on the cable a name where it goes from and where it goes to, because that's actually very often quite relevant for cables. So marking, it's not necessarily only the same thing as you see in your project, but it's also what you know in your project. And that means that for cables, for instance, it would be quite okay for this cable here to be labeled with, I think, large bold capital letters W2, but I would also have it going from Q2 going to M1. So this to and from, you can see to and from as I know it in my project, and I know to and from because of the arrow here, then I would definitely mark it that way, and I would put large label on it saying going from Q2 going to M1, and then the cable is called W2 because I might theoretically have several cables between the components, but I want to label it that way. And I know it because it's in my project, so I simply know that the cable connects those two components. And that also goes for the other cables that I have, that they go from, they go to, and you can see the arrows here. This is the same cable, but I have one conductor going from this X2 position 5, and the other cable conductor is going from X2 position 6, but they're going to this S2 push button that I have in my external control. But the cable is still W3. So if I want to mark it, I want to mark it again going from, going to. And that would definitely make sense when you go and want to maintain this installation. It's not that big, but you want to mark your components with those to and from. I guess you want to do that. Then I have saved the best for last. The best is cable wire marking, because wire marking creates a lot of questions often in our program. And I think I'll just start and I'll go in here and see this very small piece here. When I want to mark the wires here, then I can mark them in different ways. And I have built-in functions in the program. So this is not just about marking. This is also about how to use wire marking in the program, and what are the requirements and what can you do. One thing that you can do is that when you make your drawings, you can make dot connections, as I have done here. It's so that when you make dot connections, the only thing that you actually tell people reading the project is that you have the same potential. I think I'll just put this one on here. You have the same potential at this terminal point as on this terminal point and this terminal point. Meaning, if you come with your multimeter and say, I want to measure, does this belong to each other, then you should measure the same potential exactly those 3 places. But as you can see, the program guesses how things are connected. So right now the program thinks that I have one wire going from here to here, one wire going from here to here, and I have one wire going from here to here, and from here to here. That means 2 connections here, 2 connections here, and 2 connections up here. I guess that no one would make connections like that. But that's how the program understands it right now. That means that you could go in, and I think I'll do it like this. This is that's wrong. I'll go to the line function, because I could do it like this. This is a new function in version 20. So those of you who haven't downloaded it yet, just just enjoy this, because I could go into here and say dot to branch in the area. I'll make it this way, and in that way I've made branches instead. Branches telling exactly how I want to connect this. Right now the branches say that I have 2 connections up here on all 3 terminals. If I want them to be on F1, I can simply space. I cannot change them in one operation, but I can take one at a time and simply use a space bar, and then you can see the arrow points to this. So now it's been connected to this here, but the wire number symbol doesn't move itself. Wire numbering in PCSCHEMATIC works in different ways, but I have a function up here called wire numbering. And if I want to wire number, meaning I want to number all wires, beware of wire numbering is 1 number on each wire. Then I can go in, I can remove the existing ones and replace them. I can select the directions that I want to do it in, but I'll just go up here because I don't want to do so much more. But you can see that the program pops up now and says that somewhere in this project it's not made in mounting mode. It means I still have dots somewhere, so it gives me a warning saying that the position of those wire numbers are actually a guess. That's what I told you just before. But I can control them, and you can see that now the wire numbers are put in different ways. This way of wire numbering is, and now I'll switch to something very different. You can see here, wire numbering. When we talk wire numbering, and now for those of you who do not know it, I'm one of the so-called national experts, and I work with standardization also in Denmark. And one of the standards that we need to follow is about wire numbering and cable numbering, and it's called IEC 62491. And you could go in and say that it's a very small panel that you have, or a small system, so you don't need to mark it because you can follow all conductors, all cables, all wires visually, so you don't need to do anything. But this method here that I actually use now is called identification marking. That means that every wire that I have in the system here is now marked with a unique number. And this wire number function is exactly what I do here. That's identification marking. Back to the program again, or the project again, because I know a lot of you guys would hate this, because then you'd need to make your drawings from the beginning, because you don't want to be dependent on those dots here. And I know a lot of people would go up and say, this is not wire numbering, because then you have the same number in both ends, but down here you would have 2 different numbers because I have 2 different wires. A lot of people would go in and say, we'll do potential numbers, and that's potential numbers. Each net will get its own number, and you can see now I will only have a number 8, 9, 10, meaning there will be a double ferrule here with 8, and a normal ferrule with 6, with 8 again, and again a normal ferrule with 8, or just 1 number on it. So this way of marking, I know a lot of you guys do that, and if you do that, back to the rules, you can see that this is what I would say signal marking, because it's marked with the signal it represents. And here I'll just say it's what the contents of potential. It simply gets a subsequent number, and and then I can mark it with that. So if that's what I want to do, then I can do that. If I want to do this up here, identification marking, I can do that. Those 2 wire number functions are the functions that are in my wire number functions. If I go into it, I think I'll just show you. You can either remove and replace, or you can renumber existing ones. And you can select which corner and which direction you want to number in. And you can save it, and then it will be saved. But you can also go in and say that when you do mark it, do you want to have 2 numbers, 2 digits? You see I have 0, 8, 0, 9, 10. So I have 2 digits in each number. I want to start with 1. I know that some people, they really love marking and naming components and wires with page numbers too. If you want to do that, and at least when you come to the project, then you can see exactly where the wire starts, and then you just say that I want to restart on wire shift, meaning that you have like 99 wires per page that you could use. If you want to do that way, you could do that. There's also one possibility to say that the component connected component connection, and that means the first one, that would be this one up here, Q12 would be the name of all this. I can just do it here. You can see this would be the name of the potential, so you could see at least the first component it was connected to. But different ways of doing it, but when it all boils down to, well, we call it signal marking or potential marking in our project here. What I could also do when I do this is that I could go in and say that I want to use my connection names here as marking. I know a lot of you guys want to do it that way. You want to come in and say the wire that is connected to Q12 is marked with Q12, or marked with only 2, marked with only 1. Depends on simply what kind of material you use. If you print it out and you use like a printed label, then you don't really care about how many digits you have. But if you have the ones that you push on, then I would care with how much I would put on it. But if I want to only call it 2 or Q12, Q14, Q16, and at that end here it would be Q3, 2, and F11, then back to this with the rules. It's a method that we call either terminal marking, I think we call it here in Denmark. You could call it local connection marking, it's called in the standard, or method CL. And I think a lot of you guys, when you do your marking of your components, of your panels, this is a very, very often used way of marking, no matter where I've been, not just here in Denmark, but a lot of people would do it this way. It's very easy, and if things break, it's very easy to take off all the wires of the component, and you can take it to the workshop, find a spare part, put it back in the panel, and then you have all the loose wire ends, and it's very easy to see where do they come from or where do they belong to. So if you want to do that, then again, you can do it, no problem. But it's not what we call wire numbering with the function that we have in our program. I could also mark, and some people say that I probably ate something or drank or smoked something that wasn't good for me. If I say this method here is also a possibility when you mark components, because if you look in here, that would mean that up here on 2, I would have a label saying F11. That means up here, the remote connection. And if it was inside my panel, a lot of people would probably be right saying that this would be not so good. It wouldn't be very logical. But imagine that you are this. I have a lot of numbers here. I think I'll just get rid of all those wire numbers here. So I'll just remove them all, because then they're gone. Imagine that you were here on the terminal row, and it might not be a terminal row. It might be a PLC, for instance, and then instead of just marking it with the input number or terminal name up here, you probably mark it, or it could be one way of marking it, with the connected component. That could, again, on the cable, it would probably be a cable connection, but marking it with a connected component up here would sometimes, actually quite often, make very good sense if you are referring to external components like sensors or actuators, whatever, but components connected to the PLC's addresses, that would make sense. It could also make sense, back again to the list here, it could definitely also make sense simply marking them with the signal name, sort of a combination maybe of the component, and it could be with the cable name, for instance, or it could be with the connected component, or the signal as an input from so and so. So again, if you look here, you can see that you have a lot of different things, and I think that many times will be relevant in different places in the um, in the project. Internally in the panel, it might be very good just to have the terminal marking or label local connection marking outside from the panel and out. It would be nice to know the remote ones and the ones that you are on, and maybe the signal too. That means just combined marking. But you're free to make all different kind of markings, but you need to get them out of the project. And that's the last thing that I want to show you. So if I go up here and say, I want to make I think I should rename it again, by the way. I think I'll put the wire numbers on once again. Remove and replace, and I will have my consecutive numbers here, all pages, and now I have new wire numbers. That was not wire numbers, that was my potential numbers. I'll say wire numbers, and then again I'll go in here. What I can do now is that I can make a list, what we call a connection list file, because if I want to mark this here, you can see if I want to mark that, I couldn't select to mark it either with the wire numbers, or I could select to mark it with to and from, or from and to, or whatever. But I need to have a full list here, a connection list, and this one here goes in and say from this end with the name, the article number, again big small ones, and then it goes to, that's the article number, then it goes to this end and the name and article number. And I have names from to, I have names to from, because sometimes I want to make a label saying to from to, that was a method CB. Sometimes I want to make wire numbers only, but I definitely don't want to number my jumper links. I don't want to have my cable names for normal wire numbering. So if the connection, as the one I had just below here, is a cable link, then I don't want to name it. I also don't want to name it when it's a signal, like all my faces here, everything that's connected to a signal, I don't want to label them. I can again go in and have something we call routing class. If I want to use what we call a routing class, that's also a feature that came in version 19 and also in 20, then I could go in and want to mark it with that, but that would be very related to signal name L1 power or whatever. So I normally use it for power or signal, but I can simply go in and have those ways of, I think it was belonged up here. I can simply go in and have those. And that means that if I open this one here and export it, I can have this long list here with all different kinds of information from this project. That was not, so I'll just make it that was quite big here. Then you can see that if I want to make wire numbers from this project here, I could use, remember the filter functions? I could go in and say everything, everything that has got nothing in here, out with that. Sort out empty values. Remember that function from Clip Project? In here, I could go back into, I think I have it here actually. It's sleeping, I think. It's sleeping. Forget about it because time is running out. It could go in here and then, it's here. You can see I have the list here. In my first column, I have my component name. And I have my reference designation, I have my component name, I have the article number, that was my from, my to end, the same thing, and then from to from, and then I have the list here with wire numbers or no wire numbers, with cable names, no cable names, all of that. And I use it in here and say filter sorting. What do I want it for? In this here, I have selected to say that everything that's a cable, forget about that. If I want to only give it to from names, I don't want either to have the ones with the face on. So in column 12, I would go in and say that I could filter out. So see, everything that's in here is filtered out. If I wanted to have jumper links, they are in column 10. If I want to have it that, I could filter. Now I think it says less here. It's jump or link, but I could simply filter them out if they had a certain value. So the same kind of logic as I had before. And then when I want to have it here, I can use the material mapping. And in here, I'll see what happens here. You can see here, to, from to, reference designations. And this is what I have here. This is actually column 1. That's that one. I don't want to use that one, so off with you. But I could say it goes from this one, and then I want to have it to this one. I could go in here, and then I have a label here with to and from, and that's what I would have here. I think we might go in and say can only fit so much into this line here. That's not very nice. Definitely not very nice. I'm sorry. I don't know why that one came in with a different. Maybe it's because I have 2 different fonts here, so we'll see what happens. But no, it doesn't want to fit it. But you can see the idea is that you simply go in and drag the columns that you want to have, drag them in the place, and you can see all the ones that I have here. They will be put on the label, and that's more or less how you do it. I hope that even though it wasn't exactly the way I wanted it, mainly because the Phoenix contact guy was not here, but I hope that it worked sort of all right for you too. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and then we'll answer them. If I cannot answer them, or my colleague cannot, then we'll forward them to Phoenix Contact, because they can definitely do something about Clip Project. So very much thank you for joining us, and hope to see you for one of the other webinars that we have. Thanks for now.